Hello, kiddies! Be sure to subscribe.
And click that bell!
Yes, Freddy, we know. Click the bell. That way you'll always be up to date on all the latest slasher mayhem brewing in the 80s slasher library.
And click that thumbs up! 'Cause if you don't, I'll make sure you never have pleasant dreams again!
And be sure to follow the 80s Slasher Librarian on Twitter. Join the Facebook group page and the subreddit. Links in the description below. Join now, or playtime will be over. Tonight's upload is brought to you by the patrons of the 80s Slasher Librarian. That's Alleyway and DK.
Bonanza Jelly Bean, Daniel Mackey, Bree Girl,
Dave Arnold, Alex Vanover, Carl Eakins, Cecilia Spears, Krista Campbell, Allison Saib, Hawaii, Iron Alexa, Jay Gardner, Catherine McClear, Kristen Kay, Lauren Vaught, Liam Anderson,
Michael, Rob Davey, Ryan Woodward,
Sean Campbell, William Schaefer, and Willow Ravenwood. Thank you, kiddies, for supporting the channel on Patreon.
We couldn't do it
without you. And anyone listening right now, if you would like to support this channel and see it keep going and growing for years to come, then check out the links in the description below for the Patreon page and the merch store. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, the novelization by Nicholas Grabowsky. Ultimate Edition, Chapter 16. A precipitant crash generated from within the Carruthers home, and the sounds echoed through the hallways and rooms, lightly vibrating windows and the glass chandelier situated over the dining table, the room adjacent to the kitchen. The front door had smashed completely in, splintering partially and knocking a painting of clowns laughing on a beach from the wall. Carefully, cautiously, letting his 12-gauge lead the way, Sheriff Meeker entered. Behind him, stepping into the living room with equal circumspection, was Dr. Loomis, his 9mm Smith & Wesson in his hand and ready. Meeker had been a deputy in those cold, horrific days when death walked into the quiet streets, and at the time the entire police force knew how to handle this Michael Myers fellow. It was very simple. Kill him. Shoot the bastard down. But after all this time, the very thought of merely shooting the bastard down seemed all too easy. Vaguely, this was like a dream to the sheriff, a hazy, obscure sort of dream at that, and he feared that somewhere within the confines of the next few minutes, this obscure dream would detour into the terror of nightmare. Regardless, Meeker knew that, no matter how hauntingly miraculous the circumstances were, or at least seemed to be, Michael Myers was, well, stoppable. To Meeker, the good Dr. Loomis was a desperate, complicated man who had been through hell, and that very same hell was what this damned doctor was somewhat responsible for. Sure, the government stuck their asses in the situation somewhere, but the doctor could have done something, could have fought the orders to first transfer this ungodly murderer 10 years ago. He could have taken the matter to court, could have done some goddamn thing. On the other hand, he had suddenly developed somewhat of a sense of trust for Loomis, and this trust was built upon the fact that nobody knew this monster better than he. Good old Dr. Loomis. Good old goddamn Dr. Loomis. But Meeker knew what he was doing, too. If this was true, if Myers had somehow escaped captivity and returned to Haddonfield, the sheriff was sure as all hell that he was not about to let a repeat of 10 years ago unfold this night. He grew up in this cozy Illinois town, and he was not about to let it go into oblivion at the hands of a psycho. But this man was more than a psycho. He recalled how Loomis had informed him dozens of times that he's not a mere psychopath. You must understand, he is unadulterated evil. But the sheriff thought to himself, soon enough he's going to be unadulterated dog shit. That is to say, if he's actually here. Loomis felt for the wall-mounted light switch within the darkened room and flooded the room with light. It was a little girl's bedroom, complete with dolls and an overabundance of them, and brightly colored little girls' toys and a dresser and bedsheets, and he noticed the window was open, the wind blowing eerily through the pink curtains. He went over to it, inspected the area outside momentarily, then shut the window and disassociated himself from the cold. He turned and his attention diverted toward the open closet. As he held his gun directly before him, he gently used his feet in moving the doors of the closet further open. When he was quite sure all was definitely clear, he eased his way inside for further inspection. There was a scattering of photographs at his feet, and he bent down to examine them. There appeared to be at least a dozen of them. It did not surprise him in the least when he saw the photograph of Laurie Strode, her husband, and there was their little daughter, their little girl Jamie Lloyd, so innocent. His gaze met something else that was familiar, and the mere sight seemed to stiffen his senses momentarily. There, to his left, was the photograph of Michael and Judith Myers. A shuffling to his side, it was Meeker stepping up to join him. Loomis raised the picture to eye level.
"Something?" Meeker spoke. "He's been here," Loomis told him plainly.
There was a slight tremor in his voice. Meeker stepped in closer, his eyes focusing on whatever it was Loomis held.
"How do you know?"
And with that, the doctor stood aside, disclosing yet another discovery, the mangled heap of the Labrador. It was Meeker's turn to experience the coldness that the doctor now felt. Meeker spoke.
"This thing's starting to spook me, Doc."
"At least I'm not alone." "Oh?" the sheriff said, being unable to bring himself to believe the doctor could, with his experience, be exactly balls to the wall with fear.
"How long have you been scared?"
25 years. Loomis had seen enough. He turned and moved past Meeker towards the door, and the sheriff followed him out, finding his gaze difficult to remove from the remains of what had once been the family pet. Downstairs in the living room, the two met a deputy who had been waiting for them near the entrance. As Meeker allowed Loomis to exit the front door, he turned to the deputy, who stood awaiting his command.
"Logan," Meeker ordered, "I want you here just in case the family comes home."
"Right here, Ben," Logan replied.
"Look sharp, understand?"
Immediately, the deputy double-checked the chambered rounds in his .38 long barrel. "No problem, Sheriff." As Meeker closed the front door, he secretly wished the man luck. He had an idea what the town would be up against, but a mere idea wasn't enough, and this was going to be one hell of a night. Chapter 17. Jack Sayer awoke, startled, choking momentarily on his own saliva, which caused him to cough out yellow phlegm over his steering wheel. A dark dream escaped him as consciousness embraced him with the chilly nighttime air. A soft web of spotlight streamed down from a fixture embedded upon the side of the First Presbyterian Church of Haddonfield, illuminating the vacant lot nearby and Sayer's pickup truck beneath. As immediately as reality gripped him, he was overwhelmed by two distinct thoughts. He had passed out while watching for Loomis, which foiled the purpose of the entire stakeout, and something oblong and black was writhing and flailing between his legs at his crotch. He jolted upwards in sheer fright, shrieking, his hands moving to brush it away, whatever it was. He calmed enough to take a good look at it. He picked it up. It was a wind-up rubber rat. 5 young teenagers burst into a chorus of laughter beyond the open driver's window, and the Reverend nearly cursed to Almighty God before he caught himself. He flung the toy below the glove compartment. The kids scurried quickly away from his pickup, all of them garbed in Halloween attire and glowing face paint. One of them stopped running for a moment, pushed aside his Dracula cape, and spit out a set of vampire teeth. "Trick or treat, old man!" he exclaimed, and ran off to join his peers in the distant dark. Jack Sayer was alone, and it became quiet again, even more quiet than when he'd first arrived. He stared out his windshield out past the street and at the front door of the tranquil police station.
"Well, damn it to all eternal hell,"
he spat, and he groped for his whiskey bottle. He found it uncapped and brought it to his lips, his eyes canvassing the surroundings and his mind struggling to come to terms with what to do next. His eyes caught sight of a tow truck resting vacant and silent at the opposite side of the garbage dumpster that he'd parked beside. He looked, but there was nobody around. Sayer's fatigue was all but spent from the rudely abrupt wake-up call, but a mild hangover and another plan soon festered in his brain. He leaned over and fetched a towel, absently wiped off the running wetness from the steering wheel. Discarding the towel, he reached into his glove compartment for a pair of reading glasses. Hell, he didn't need them. All the reading he ever did was of the good book anyway. Besides, the Reader's Digest and the National Enquirer, and he knew the Lord's Word by heart, cover to cover, verse by verse, at least on his good days. From now on, those glasses belonged to Dr. Loomis. That's it, the old Reverend devised. "I'm going to walk right into that there station, let 'em know the good doctor left his glasses in my cab, and ask for his whereabouts so's I can deliver them proper back into his hands." Whether the plan worked or not, it was up to Jesus. He discarded his whiskey and emerged from the cab. As he shut the door of his vehicle, he gave the abandoned tow truck a second glance. Gripping the spectacles, he made his way across the street and towards the entrance of the police station. A sole sheriff sedan sat in the parking lot as he passed it. He arrived at the front door and entered the station. Inside, Deputy Pierce rose up from his desk to the front counter to immediately meet him.
Can I help you?" "Maybe you can help me,"
the Reverend spoke, adjusted his clergy collar, and let out a raspy cough.
I was good enough to give Dr. Loomis a lift into town, officer, and I believe he left his glasses behind. Could you be good enough to allow me to return them to him? Whereabouts you suppose he's gone off to?"
If you'll just leave them with me," the deputy replied, "I'll see to it the doctor gets them."
"If you don't mind, I'd like to return them personal,"
Sayer told him. "The town's in a state of emergency," said the deputy. "Leave them here. I'll tell him you dropped them off. Don't worry. A good motel's up the road, a quarter mile. I'll tell him you're staying there if you wish to meet up with him. I can't tell how long he'll be, though. This is one hell of a night. It's all I can do for you."
"You can tell him that," the Reverend said, "but I'll keep those for him myself, you understand?"
"Suit yourself." Sayer nodded to him, clutching the glasses, and solemnly bade him farewell. The face of the apocalypse would have to wait, he figured, but he knew fate would inevitably cross their paths. Someday. It was his destiny. It was its destiny. A motel a quarter mile up the street. It was all he had going for him now, and a night's lodging would do him good. Turning, he made his way to exit into the night. He opened the door and stepped outside. There, directly before him, stood the face of the apocalypse. Sayer gasped. The eyes behind the chalky white mask stared down upon him, a motionless cold. The glasses fell from the Reverend's hands, dropping onto the ground. Taking a step away from the abomination, the heel of his shoe met with them, crushing them. His screams echoed into the cold breeze, and for a moment, no one heard them until it was too late. Chapter 18. The smoke-filled pool hall and bar lounge was filled to capacity with the town's usual beer-bellied personalities, sucking down beers and shooting 8-balls in exchange for a chance of good luck at earning a little sum of money. It was a typical setting for a town such as Haddonfield, where everyone knew how many teeth everyone else had and didn't really give a shit either way. Friends were friends and enemies were enemies. And the only enemies in Haddonfield were the out-of-town truck-driving brawlers who came into Haddonfield to pick fights, and the winter weather. But now at this time they had neither. There were no strangers tonight. Well, perhaps there were a few, but remained virtually unnoticed amid the bar noise and the laughter. There was a woman in skimpy clothes who always had a fancy for the jukebox, which was at this time blurting out Bruce Springsteen. As the boss sang out about beer and called her Charlene, across the way, a middle-sized man in overalls knocked over his half-full bottle of beer onto the pool table. He pulled out a flimsy handkerchief from a pocket and frantically wiped away the liquid before it could be completely absorbed by the blue-green felt padding. Earl Ford was the bartender. His son Mel had recently turned legal age and now assisted him. And occasionally there was Huey, who helped him on busy nights like this. But tonight Huey was sick with the stomach flu. This was Earl's joint, and that was what the tattered baseball bat read in bold black lettering up above the half-size swordfish on the wall behind him. Earl was pretty close to 45, but his true age was somewhat of a mystery, because he always liked folks to keep guessing. It was a belief among some that old Earl never really knew his own age, or that he somehow forgot. His face was like that of a bulldog, and he had the body of a professional wrestler, but he, in fact, despised wrestling with a passion. He would often tell people he didn't quite rightly know why he hated it so, but perhaps it was the fact that the matches were so damn fake. Besides, wrestlers looked like a bunch of fags out there on the mats, and the audience looked like a bunch of drunken Nazis. At least that's what he thought. Tonight was an ordinary night, or at least it had been, until something caught Earl's attention on the television. He was often distracted by the 22-inch television, always watching for Ernest commercials or commercials with Joe Isuzu. But this time what attracted his attention was something quite different. He stepped over to the set and raised the volume. A news anchorman was explaining something which seemed to be urgent. Hell, of course it was urgent. Anything that said special bulletin in the background was unusual and urgent. And from what Earl's ears picked up, it sounded like the woman was talking about evacuating the streets. What the hell? By order of the sheriff's office, the anchorwoman continued, all citizens of Haddonfield are asked to clear the streets. Still, the bartender could not hear. God damn it. Everybody shut up a goddamn minute, he yelled out, and the bar quieted, heads turning. Still, some people just could not hear straight. I said, God damn it, everyone shut up. Silence, the anchorwoman continued. Remain indoors until further notice. All businesses are asked to close as soon as possible. Stay tuned to the station for further updates. A tall man, Orrin Wesley, called out, What's all that shit, Earl? That was exactly what Earl was about to ask Meeker himself, or whoever the hell was at the office. Immediately he moved to the bar's wall, where there was a mounted phone. He picked up the receiver and dialed hurriedly. Who are you calling? Another man asked. Earl replied, Police station. I ain't closing down without a good goddamn reason. Everyone waited. All eyes in the bar rested on Earl. In the background, a few men continued to quietly resume a game of pool, ears open. After a few lingering moments, Earl angrily hung up the phone. He proceeded to remove his bar smock. Well? Orrin asked. It just rang, was all Earl would reply. Within the next minute, the entire place was ringing with the sounds of chairs moving and shoes brushing against the wooden floor. Voices of curiosity added to the commotion as the crowd proceeded to follow the bartender out into the front of the bar, through the single front door past the Don't Drink and Drive sign, and out onto the asphalt of the car-crammed parking lot. Yet another follower rushed up to the bartender from within the crowd, asking where the hell he was going and why the hell everyone was following him, knowing full well he was just as dumbfounded as everyone else about the sudden urgency of the news report. We're gonna see Ben, Earl told him angrily. Phone never just rings at a police station. No way, no how. Everyone piled up into their respective vehicles, pickups, four-wheel drive Blazers, Jeeps, Broncos, and the like, all covered with enough dirt to pave a small street. Earl's Chevy was the first to kick up a wave of dust, and he led the way as the others filled the street from behind. One hell of a night, all right. Chapter 19. Guests exited Justin Fallbrook's palatial home, all dressed in their finest attire, some half drunk, others having had little or none to drink, but all having enjoyed the party. They were walking to the rows of cars parked along the side of the street, wondering what the urgency was in that news flash. Some had attempted to call the police station but got no answer. Still, they would comply with the warning and perhaps call the station later from their own homes. Richard and Darlene Carruthers stepped across the walkway down the front lawn, and one of the couples who had apparently very little to drink. Let's just drive home first, Darlene said. Rachel said they wouldn't be out long. Richard looked around and spotted who he was looking for. There's Justin. I better say goodnight. Richard, Darlene called after him, but he was already on his way to speak to the man. He called out to his wife behind him. I'll take 2 seconds. He went over to Justin Fallbrook, a man in his late 40s, and a very wealthy man at that. He was in the process of bidding an older couple goodnight. Justin? Richard spoke out to him. Mr. Fallbrook turned. In a kindly but nonetheless worrisome voice, he said to him, Richard, I'm so sorry you can't stay for dinner. I hope you understand, Richard said. No apologies, he replied. Children come first in my book, too. Look, I'll see you tomorrow morning on the 3rd floor, 9 sharp, okay? Richard was momentarily stunned. With a mixture of delightful surprise, he exclaimed, 3rd floor? At first, he wasn't sure he quite understood. Then the reality crept over him, and he wholeheartedly welcomed it. I got it? He felt like a little kid. Behind him, Darlene was calling him. Richard, come on! Richard was overcome with both relief and tremendous joy. This was something that he had worked very, very hard for. Very hard indeed. I got it! He cried. Darlene came up behind him and clenched his arm. The door to their car was open, and it didn't take too long for the two to make it inside and drive away. Their car intermingled with the flow of traffic the news report had created from the Fallbrook party. And all the way home, Richard kept repeating, This was one hell of an evening, let me tell you. Chapter 20. An open lot dotted with the lofty, darkened configurations of towers marked the presence of the Haddonfield Transformer Station. A network of city power cables sprawled out into the night in all directions like hundreds of giant, many-legged spiders in their blackened webs. A utility truck was parked beside a main circuit junction box, and nearby there was a lone utility worker carrying out routine maintenance on open power panels. As he wearily continued to work, taking in an obscure sort of electrical tool and placing it in the trail of brightness flooding from his pocket flashlight, he brought his gloved fingers around a multitude of wires and switches and carefully went about his adjustments. He paused for a brief moment and removed from his pocket a package of Wrigley's, opened the wrapper, and popped a stick between his teeth. Suddenly he looked up. There, not far from his truck, stood the darkened shape of a man. It began to move, taking a few dilatory steps across the expanse of the lot, passing close by in shadow. Hey! The worker shouted. Hey! Shit for brains! This is city property! No trespassing! The shape continued to walk, frustrated and angry. The worker moved away from the junction box and stepped into the shape's path. The shape continued toward him, until the man reached out his hand, planting it firmly into the figure's chest and stopping him cold. Are you deaf, or are you just stupid? Absolutely nothing from the shape. It stood motionless, facing the worker. I could have you arrested, asshole! Still, there was no response. The worker could hear the breathing sounding in slow, hissing emissions from behind whatever the hell this man was wearing over his face. Something like a large, distorted white mask. The worker continued with the Halloween freak. You are one dumb son of a bitch! He exclaimed. Finally, the thing before him was giving him the chills. This was way too strange, and here he was out there alone amidst the low hummings of the power cables. All right, I'm on the radio to the police right now. Don't even think about leaving. The worker went back toward his truck. Behind him, the shape proceeded to follow. The worker quickly spun around, startled at the shape's sudden proximity. Silence. No one made the slightest movement. Until a hand shot out from the obscurity of the shape and clenched the man's neck. Stunned, there was little time for the worker to struggle. He managed a swift kick and then another, both legs flinging into open air at the thing's side. In his overwhelming terror, he realized that he was no longer on the ground. He was being held there, fighting helplessly for his life. And it was then, at that very moment, that he knew he was going to die. He could feel the coldness of the shape's hand, feel the sensation of it seeping through his skin as if his neck were made from a gelatinous putty. He attempted to scream, but the wind inside him found no means for escape. He feared that at any time his neck would simply snap from the force. The shape lifted him even further from the ground and flung his limp body into the circuit junction box, impaling him. Amidst his own blood and flesh sizzling against the flying spark, he finally managed a single, agonizing scream. Then it was all over. Amidst his own blood and flesh sizzling against the flying spark, He finally managed a single agonizing scream, and then it was all over. His dead body remained quivering there as the shape watched, its head cocked in morbid fascination. The box continued to short-circuit around the body, and all around the encompassing area the transformers began to shower a spectacle of sparks. Lightning arcs of rampant power surges began to shatter cables. The station's transformers began to turn into a forest of flaming brilliance, storms of electricity erupting from all directions. The shape continued to walk on. The last of his presence developed into a silhouette against the festivity of powerful light. Then it disappeared in the direction of the town and into the night. In the streets of Haddonfield, true and ultimate darkness set in. Okay, Slashaholics, this was a short upload, but this has been chapters 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 of Halloween 4, the Ultimate Edition by Nicholas Grabowsky. Quite a bit happened in these short chapters. We got a little more of story advancement with Loomis and Meeker finding the dog. I really don't like talking about that scene too much because I'm a dog lover and animal lover, and that scene just bugs the hell out of me. But yeah, so they found the dog. Meeker, at least, is taking this seriously now. In a lot of horror movies, the law enforcement, seems to drag their feet a lot. So it's nice in this movie and in this book for the police to actually, whether it's going to do any good or not, actually take things seriously from the get-go. I guess it helps having this had happened a couple times before there in Haddonfield. And then, we got a little bit of the bar scene with the bartender and the townsfolk who end up, they're wanting to go find out what the hell's going on. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen the movie or read the book, but at the time, they just want to know what the hell's going on. They can't get a hold of the cops. The phones aren't working, so they're on their way to get some answers from the town law enforcement. The whole scene with the parents at the party just seemed kind of like fillers, just something to a story thing, a plot movement to get them from point A to point B. Not a whole lot going on there with them. The scene with Sayer, I gotta say about Sayer. The thing about Sayer, his death seemed kind of short, and it seems like we could have got more out of that in the book, but it's okay. The book has been really good so far. And sometimes using our imagination for these deaths is even more fun. The whole thing of him just stepping outside, the whole glasses thing that he took in there, and he drops it, steps on him right before he himself gets pretty much shattered by Michael Myers. And what's funny about that scene, not funny, haha, but, he pulls this off right in front of the police station, and by the time the police know what's going on, it's too late for them to do anything. But if they had actually been paying attention to things around their police station, maybe Halloween 4 would have stopped right then and there. At least been stalled a bit if they had shot him up pretty good. Anyways, I did enjoy the way tonight's upload ended. Very much so, with the electrical worker. Sitting there driving his finger into Michael's chest, trying to tell Michael what for. That's the one thing you don't do, folks. You don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit in the wind, and you don't mess around with Michael Myers or Jason or anybody like that. You see him, you run the other way. You don't sit there and poke him and try to tell him what for. But I thought his death was pretty badass. I love that he went from Mr. Tough Guy to Mr. Wet in His Pants. I'm really enjoying this book so far, and I hope you all are too. I'm looking forward to the next upload. I'll have it out very soon. Let me know in the comments section what you think of this book so far, if you're enjoying the narrations. And, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, have a great night, and I'll see you next time.